The year is 1094. You wake up and realize something is wrong. The sun should have risen 2 hours ago, but the sky remains dark. You touch the wall of your house. It's covered in ice inside. Outside, the sea has turned to stone. The boats are trapped like insects in amber. And then you discover the terrifying truth. It's not just a cold morning. Winter simply decided not to go away. This is the true story of when nature declared war on the Vikings, and how an entire generation had to choose between freezing to death or discovering a completely new way to survive. But to understand the full extent of what was to come, you must first understand what was lost. In the year 1093, the grandsons of the legendary raiders of Lin's Farn controlled an empire that stretched from the ice of Greenland to the warm rivers of Kiev. They were no longer just warriors. They were traders, artisans, farmers, and navigators who turned the North Sea into their private highway. Imagine waking up on a summer morning in a Norwegian fjord. The sun shines for nearly 20 hours. Your nets return heavy with cod and salmon. In the fields, golden barley sways in the salty breeze. Your neighbor has just returned from Constantinople, bearing spices and stories. Your children play in the warm water of the fjord, preparing to one day sail like their ancestors. Life was hard, yes, but it was predictable. There was a rhythm. Plant in spring, sail in summer, harvest in fall, endure in winter. It had always been this way for generations. The elders told of harsh winters of the past, it's true, but always with the same comforting ending. And then spring arrived, except that in late 1093 something changed. The north winds blew differently. The gulls migrated too early. And for the first time in centuries, the September snows didn't melt in October. It was the first warning, but no one could have imagined that they were about to enter a winter that would last not months, but years. January 1094 arrived with a terrifying revelation. Spring had disappeared from the calendar. It was the fishermen who noticed first. Where once they had broken through thin layers of ice to cast their nets, they now encountered a white wall 3 meters thick. The sound of hammers against the ice echoed through the fjords. Bang, 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 until the tools broke and hands bled. But the ice wouldn't budge. Then came February, March, April. The sun, when it appeared, was a pale circle devoid of warmth like the dead eye of a frozen fish. The seed stored for planting rotted in the damp barns. The earth, when anyone managed to dig through the snow, was as hard as iron. Can you imagine the exact moment an entire village realizes it is doomed? It's not dramatic, it's silent. It's the father who stops talking about the next harvest. It's the mother who begins to divide the bread into ever smaller pieces. It's the crying of the children that stops, not because they've been comforted, but because they no longer have the energy. The records speak of a specific phenomenon, the white silence. The birds had departed or died. The wolves had migrated. Even the wind seemed to have frozen. One survivor wrote, "The world wasn't ending with fire or flood. It was simply stopping." In May, a snowstorm covered what was left of the crops. That's when the real panic began. Boats were dismantled for firewood. Furniture burned by an hour of heat. Some tried to eat boiled leather, others worse. The tree rings of that period tell the story in silent language. Rings so thin they can barely be seen. A few years without any growth, the earth was dying and taking everyone with it. But it was precisely when all seemed lost that the most extraordinary stories of human courage emerged. Meet Bild. She had hands that brought life into the world, the most respected midwife in 3 villages. When eternal winter arrived, those same hands began to close the eyes of the dead, until one stormy night messengers arrived. A child was dying in the neighboring village. They said it was cold fever. No one knew what to do anymore. Knild was 47 years old and had arthritis. The next village was a 2-day walk away in normal winter. This winter, maybe never, arrived. She went anyway. She carried herbs she had dried the previous summer, her last real summer. She walked following the stars when snow covered all the paths. She slept buried in the snow, breathing through a hole she dug with her fingers. On the 3rd day, her feet black with cold, she arrived. The child was nearly dead. Bild stayed by her side for 3 days and 3 nights, forcing bitter tears through purple lips, singing the ancient songs her grandmother taught her. The child survived. When Knild returned home, she found silence. Her entire village had perished while she saved a distant life. She knelt in the snow and spoke words that were carved in stone. "I went to the light in the dark, but my own candle went out while I was away. Now meet Einar, A fisherman since he was 7, he saw the sea freeze and swore he would not let his family starve. He built something no one had ever attempted. A boat from a single log, small enough to carry, strong enough to break ice, thin. Every morning he searched for cracks in the ice. Every morning he went further. One morning he found a school of fish trapped beneath the ice, disoriented salmon swimming in circles beneath the transparent prison. Hare broke the ice with his bare hands until he bled. He caught 17 fish, fed 3 families for a week, but the sea took its toll. The last time he went out, the current shifted beneath the ice. His boat was swept away. They found only the oar days later. With carved words, the sun will return. Tell my children that the sun always returns. And there were those who chose to flee. Whole families, sometimes entire villages, tied together what they could carry and marched south. The sagas tell of ghost caravans, lines of people moving through the snow like black ants against white paper. Many fell and did not rise. Others simply sat and waited for the end, but some, always some, continued. Those who remained had their own weapons, the vulvas, priestesses of the ancient path. They gathered in circles, lighting fires with the bones of sacred animals. They sang the Galder, magical songs their ancestors said could bend reality. Night after night they begged the sun. Come back, they sang. We remember your name, superstition perhaps. But when you're watching your children disappear inside their own clothes, they're so thin. You cling to any hope, even if it's just an ancient song whispered against the wind. And it was from this mixture of desperation and ingenuity that something extraordinary was born, a survival manual written in blood and ice. First, they reinvented fishing with the fjords frozen in massive blocks. The Vikings developed a technique that seemed crazy, fire on ice. They lit controlled fires on the frozen surface, fed with seal oil, saved from better times. The heat created deep wells that reached the water. Then they waited for hours, sometimes days, until the fish, desperate for oxygen, climbed straight to their spears. But the true genius lay in what they did with pieces of wood and leather straps. Skis had been around for thousands of years, but now they were life or death. Each family began to make their own pairs, not for sport, but for survival. With them, a man could cover in hours what previously would have taken days. He could reach distant forests where there was still edible bark. He could outrun avalanches. He could perhaps find help. Architecture also changed forever. Traditional Viking homes with their wooden walls and thatched roofs were no match for this cold. So they dug like desperate badgers. They created underground shelters, half house, half cave. The roof was at ground level, covered with layers of peat, snow, and anything else that would provide insulation. Down below, entire families lived like moles, sharing body heat, the stale air, the darkness. But the most brutal innovation was what they did with food. Or rather, with what they called food. Lichens scraped from rocks, boiled 7 times until it turned to a gray paste. Pine bark chewed to teeth hurt because it contained minimal nutrients. Dried seaweed mixed with reindeer blood when reindeer were available. Old bones broken and boiled repeatedly until a thin broth was obtained that deceived the stomach for a few hours. A document from the time describes the soup of survival. Old leather, horsehair, bitter roots. And this is real. Earth mixed with animal fat. Any fat from any animal. Among the villages, they created a system that saved hundreds. The talking drums. Each village had a watchman. Every 4 hours, day and night, they played a specific pattern. 3 beats meant still alive. 2 long blasts meant help was needed. Silence for more than 8 hours. The village had fallen, and the others knew there were empty houses to loot for supplies. It was brutal, yes, but the alternative was for everyone to die with their survival secrets. And so day after day, the Vikings proved something that echoes through the centuries. Humans can adapt to virtually any hell, as long as they don't lose the last thing that separates them from death, the hope of seeing another dawn. Let me take you inside a Viking home. June 15th, 1094. It should almost be summer. It's 4 a.m., but no one knows it. There are no roosters to crow. The father wakes first, not because he got enough sleep, but because the cold has penetrated the 3 layers of skin covering him. His first conscious seconds are always the worst. The realization that it wasn't a nightmare. Winter is still here. He can't just get up. His muscles are stiff as frozen ropes. First, he flexes his fingers 1, 2, 3 times, checking to see if he still has them all. He lost 2 toes on his left foot 3 weeks ago. Not to the cold, but to hunger. His own body consumed them. The fire died during the night. Again, with practiced movements, he blows on the ashes searching for a live ember, a single red spark. He finds it, feeds it with shreds of fabric torn from his own clothing, then sticks the size of twigs. Wood is rationed, 1 log per day, no more. The smell of smoke wakes the children. They no longer cry, no longer ask for food, just crawl to their father, forming a human pile around the only source of heat. The mother counts the children by touch. 5, still 5. Yesterday there were 5, today there are 5. It's a victory. Breakfast is a ritual of imagination. The mother boils water, always the snow to melt. She adds 3 dried birch leaves, a spoonful of ground bone meal, and something that was once barley but is now just grey dust. As she stirs, she always sings the same song about golden fields and fresh bread. The children close their eyes and pretend to taste it. Noon is the time for the expedition. The eldest son, 12, with the body of an 8-year-old, ties rags to his feet and sets out. His mission? To find anything green under the snow, anything alive. Sometimes he returns with moss, sometimes with nothing, sometimes not at all. And the family waits until dark before accepting. In the afternoon, they make the counting, not money. Coins mean nothing now. They count grains, literally. 47 grains of barley left, 12 pieces of dried fish, half a jar of rancid fat. It's a simple and terrible calculation with 5 mouths. How long? To 0. But it's at dusk that something magical happens. Everyone gathers in the circle of light from the single candle. And the grandfather, there's always a grandfather, even if he's just the oldest man still alive, tells the stories. Not sad stories. Stories of Thor fishing the world serpent, of Odin gaining wisdom, of springs past when the fjords were blue as baby eyes. The children ask heartbreaking questions. What does honey taste like? Is it true that flowers exist? Does the sun burn if you touch it? Before sleeping, everyone makes the same whispered oath. Until tomorrow. It's not goodbye, it's a promise, a defiance of eternal winter. And then they huddle together, breath for breath, heartbeat for heartbeat. 98 kilograms of humanity divided between 5 bodies, enduring another night at the end of the world. Now tell me, how is it possible that from this absolute darkness a lesson emerged that would forever change Norse civilization? Because winter eventually lost. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a single day when the sun burst into the sky and melted all the ice. It was gradual. First a morning when no snow fell, then a week when the ice on the windows grew thinner, then a sound no one had heard for years, water dripping from a roof. But when the spring of 1096 finally arrived, it found a different people. The Vikings who emerged from their underground lairs were not the same as those who entered, and they swore never again. First, they completely revolutionized how they stored food. Before 1094, a granary was just a granary. Then each village built what they called hunger halls, clay-sealed underground warehouses, where the temperature remained constant. Inside, not just grain, but everything. Dried fish hung in rows, seal blubber in sealed jars, even lichen and tree bark, because now they knew in extreme famine this was better than nothing. The rule became law. No family could consume its entire harvest. 1 too was mandatory. Anyone who violated this was not only fined, but exiled. Because now they understood, the selfishness of one could kill them all. Agriculture changed drastically. They abandoned the monoculture of barley and began planting turnips that resisted the cold and sedge that grew in poor soil. They developed primitive greenhouses covered with transparent skins made of seal intestines, where they cultivated medicinal herbs year-round. Diversification became survival, but the most profound change was social. Before, each family was an island. After 1094, they created what they called winter circles, groups of 5 families who swore mutual support. If one family ran out of food, the others shared. If a father died, the other men took care of his sons. If a house collapsed, everyone built a new one. Documents from the time show contracts written in runes, sealed in blood. The 5 of us are one. In famine we divide, in death we carry on. The stories of Inbild and Einar were not forgotten. They became more than memories. They became scripture. Each village began to keep a book of the brave dead. Not warriors who died in battle, but ordinary people who died trying to save others during the Great Cold. Their names were recited at every festival, their survival techniques recorded. Inbuild became the patron saint of midwives. Einar, the patron saint of desperate fishermen. Religion also changed. Pagan rituals that begged for the sun were formalized. They created the Sol blot, a sacrifice to the sun performed 4 times a year, where they burned the best parts of the harvest, not to warrior gods, but to ensure the sun would never abandon them again. Even after full Christianization, these rituals survived disguised as harvest festivals. They developed a revolutionary weather warning system. Elders were appointed as sign readers. They observed bird migration patterns, seal behavior, and the color of the sea from the sky. At dawn, any anomaly was reported. 3 coincidental signs. The village went into preparation mode. They no longer waited for disaster to arrive. And perhaps most importantly, memory. Every winter, on the darkest day of the year, the villagers held the mining, the remembrance. They told the children about 1094, not as a horror story, but as a manual. This is what we did. This is how we survived. This is what you will do if it happens again. The great winter of 1094 didn't break the Vikings. It forged them into something more resilient. It taught them that true strength lay not in conquering other lands, but in conquering the next dawn. You know what's scary? It's not that this happened 1,000 years ago, it's that the signs are here again. Glaciers melting, ocean currents shifting, weather patterns that no longer make sense. Scientists have a fancy name for it, but the Vikings would have recognized immediately. The world is about to change again. And when I look at our society, completely dependent on supply chains, on electricity, of systems we assume will always work, I wonder, would we survive 1094? You there on the other side of the screen, you who have food in the fridge and heat in the winter, have you ever stopped to think that you're just one climatic anomaly away from discovering what you're really made of? The Vikings left us a manual written in blood and ice. Yes, but a manual nonetheless. Community over individualism, preparation over consumption, memory over forgetting. If this story stirred something inside you, that chill down your spine that says this could be me, then you understand. And if you understand, you need to know there's more, much more. See this video appearing on your screen now. It's about another time humanity almost ended. Another time we thought we were invincible. Spoiler, we weren't. But the way we survived will change everything you think about resilience. And look, I could ask you to subscribe because it helps the channel or some such nonsense. But the truth is, I know that in a few years, when the signs become too obvious to ignore, you'll remember these stories and you'll be grateful for having learned while it was still just a story. So if you're the type who prefers to know the truth, however uncomfortable, then live in comfortable ignorance, you already know where to click. The bell is for when you want to be warned before it's too late. And that like, let me be honest, each like is someone saying, I see the signs too. It's comforting to know we're not alone. Now, about sharing. Do you know someone who complained about the cold this year? Who thought it was too cold or strange? Send this to them. Don't say anything, just send it. Let the story do the work. In the comments, tell me what you would do. Seriously, if summer didn't come tomorrow, if the world slowly began to freeze, what would be your first move? Because between us, I think this conversation is more urgent than it seems. Until the next episode, and hope it's just another story from the past, not a preview of the future.